Yesterday, I had a good friend come up to me, and he said to me, Glenn, I can't take the news on Boeing anymore. And I said, Ron, why is that? And he said, well, I was a pilot. And I said, that's right, for American Airlines for years. He said, yes. So I kind of know something about the airline industry. And he said, aren't all planes that come from Boeing, don't they receive a final check? Yes. Don't they also receive a final check from the government when the plane comes in and before it flies, do they not certify that that plane's now whose job would that be? By the way, when you buy a plane and the screws are loose, you'd think somebody that was signing off would be held responsible for, I didn't see the screws, right? Once a plane comes down, they have to check the plane. And if you saw some loose screws, then that would probably be, the maintenance guy that was like, where's the maintenance guy that was supposed to check the screws? He said, also, we have a minimum requirement sheet. Like if the engine falls off, well, we have another one. So we can still fly it to land it, okay? He said, if like a door of a panel falls off, he said, we can still fly the plane. We can still fly the plane. He said, we have a little checklist, like if this goes wrong, that's trouble. If a panel falls off, a panel falls off. We just adjust a little bit. We're fine.
I mean, if you're on the ground, you might not be shrugging your shoulders as much. But yes, generally speaking, the plane can keep going.
And he said, panels from time to time will fall off. He said, but what I'm thinking is there's a problem with maintenance, which would be a problem with the unions because nobody has personal pride of ownership anymore. And he said, so is it maintenance? Is it the press that is looking at all these things and don't understand that there's also a inspector that signs off on the plane? That's an interesting, because I believe that brings us back to Pete Buttigieg.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. Mm-hmm. What a surprise.
So is the theory basically that Boeing's getting unfair blame on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it could be that he's not saying they're innocent.
Right.
But he is saying that they're getting way more than their share of blame for this.
Because it's easy to point your fingers at them.
Yeah, you got a panel. You have to screw the panel back on. You're inside and doing something in maintenance with a panel. You've got to screw the panel back on.
Right. They didn't come with all the screws loose. Right. That does it would be weird.
You check for screws.
Yeah.
When you're on the ground doing maintenance, you kind of give it a once over, and then the inspector looks for those kinds of things.
Now, obviously, part of this is because they had the issues with, the one plane that they brought into, everyone was using. Was it this
777?
Air Max? Yeah. That on the heels of that, right?
But he said that doesn't make sense to him, and I didn't. He started talking, airplane physics, and I don't think there's any physics that actually make a plane fly. It's too heavy.
Could you even keep your eyes open during
no,
this?
No, I did. I just didn't understand it.
Okay.
So he said Boeing, for more fuel efficiency, he said they're more powerful engines, and they lifted them so they didn't suck a bunch of stuff from the ground, okay? Mm-hmm. So they lifted them higher. He said, and when you go into a steeper incline, he said that causes, I don't know what he called it, but a wobble that hits your tail, okay? And he said, we've trained for that for 50 years. He said there's no There is no excuse for an American pilot to have any problems with that.
And
you
didn't,
adjust.
Right? Like these were foreign incidents.
Correct.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. He said, so that's a training problem. That's not a Boeing problem. That's a training problem.
Mm. That's interesting. Well, I mean, it's not surprising that an institution would be taken down by the media, maybe with a little bit of undeserved, some at least.
Maybe,
undeserved.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd love to talk. If you're a pilot, I'd love to hear from you. Does that make sense to you? I want to take some calls from last hour. We were mentioning that I had a pilot friend come to me yesterday and go, Glenn, this is not Boeing's fault. And his name was Ron Boeing, but no. He said it's not Boeing. It's not Boeing's fault. He said, I think it's the mechanic's fault. And he explained why. But I wanted to hear from other airline pilots. This guy was a pilot for, I don't even know, 30 years, 40 years at American Airlines. And he knew what he was talking about. I couldn't translate what he was talking about, but I wanted to know if there were any pilots that agreed. Whose fault is it? Is it Boeing? Is it the FAA and Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation? Is it the airline? Is it the mechanics? Michael in Kansas, you're a pilot.
That's correct. I am.
Okay. Whose fault is it?
I'm a retired captain with United.
Okay.
It's an issue. I think your American friend was on target. I think your analysis is pretty good too, as far as I think it's just sloppiness. I've got some friends that are retired Boeing actually, and they said sometimes when they would see things wrong, they would raise a flag, say, "Hey, I saw this or that, whatever," and they were kind of ignored. And we had this whistleblower here a while back, that was found dead in his car for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But there's things, there are just some things like that there's an awful lot going on. I mean, there's a lot of airplanes out there. There's a lot of, things wearing out, what have you, like that, whether they're new or not. They're putting a lot of hours on these things. And they do need some good scrutiny. And I think it just falls through the cracks. But I don't think it's Boeing, whether it's a lack of leadership at the top on the federal end to put the focus in the correct place, or exactly what's going on there. But obviously we've got a problem.
He was telling me about the the 777 MAX, and he said that problem is caused when you are coming up at a sharp angle. He said it'll cause some sort of a wind turbulence on the tail, and he said in America we train for that. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. And I think, and like you said, the accidents that have happened, especially like with the 737 MAX, I think that was 100% training.
How come we haven't heard that?
Or lack thereof. I don't know. Third world country, you don't want to make them look bad. I don't know.
Wow. Instead, we'll blame everything on Boeing and make it look like it's like Boeing has gone bad. I mean, everything I've seen from the news has made Boeing look bad, and it wasn't until I started noticing, no, it's a lot of United planes that are having a problem. That made me think, well, maybe it's the culture at United or it's the mechanics on the ground.
Well, whether it's actually, it probably is somewhat of the culture. Whether it's the DEI type culture, I couldn't honestly say, but there's certainly a culture that leads you away from perfection.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it. In Florida, we go to Robert. Hi, Robert. You are a former airline captain or pilot?
No, Glenn. Good morning. And no, I'm a former mechanic out of the Air Force.
Okay.
I know this stuff a little bit, and it's the mechanic's fault. It's also the government and then the airline. If you really think about it, that's where you take it that one step further. The FAA issues a license to the mechanic. If the mechanic does something wrong, it's supposed to be on him as far as getting that license taken away. And if they're not doing that, they're just letting it slide. That's a problem. Like, I won't get on an airplane right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to fly where you kind of like,
right.
We're pretty sure we'll get you there.
Yeah.
Where we were, you mean on time? No, we're just pretty sure we'll get you there.
Feel great that I have several flights scheduled next week, and mechanics are calling me up
Yeah.
and saying, "Hey, don't get on flights." Great.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Don in Tennessee. Hello, Don.
Hey, Glenn. Yeah, I agree with your previous caller. I'm a retired Air Force mechanic, and he's correct. So these guys get airframe and power plant licenses from the FAA, and through a lot of experience, to get those tickets to learn how to work on airplanes. And I agree with him. I think it's complacency, and I also think it's the airlines probably trying to get those airplanes back up in the air as soon as possible, because they got, routes that they got to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are probably under pressure to fix those airplanes as fast as possible, and quality is slipping through the cracks.
So, Don, why is Boeing getting the blame?
Well, Boeing, because they're their manufacturer. They're the ones who actually created the airplane. But as your previous caller said, once Boeing delivers the airplane to United, Delta, American, whoever, it's on the airline at that point. I don't know why Boeing is. I mean, they're the one that's easy to pick on. They're the person who built the airplane. But all those big maintenance hangars at Dallas-Fort Worth for American and Delta and Atlanta,
right?
Those are all Delta employees, and they're the ones who are fixing those airplanes. I think when it goes back to the manufacturers, when you have problems that reoccur. You have trends. If you see the same thing happening over and over and over again, then you go back and say, okay, we need to do a trend analysis. But these are isolated stuff. The wheels falling off, a door coming loose, stupid things like that. That's sloppy maintenance, I think, on the mechanic side, and that's an airline issue, which is what your friend told you.
Thank you so much, Don. John in Pennsylvania. Hello, John.
Hi, Glenn.
Hi. Are you a pilot, a mechanic? What are you?
I'm sorry, retired pilot, retired 5 years at a regional airline level, and then I spent my last 3.5 years at American Airlines.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with all the other pilots that have spoken, and it basically gets down to the floor of the maintenance hangar as to the workers that are doing the work. And these guys are certified, the mechanics are certified, and it goes through a certification process once the work is done, sign-offs on the maintenance issues and everything else. To say that it's an airline's fault, it is true about trying to get the airplanes back and can be rushed on that.
Right.
To blame Boeing, I can't blame Boeing. And the MCAS system, which is what people are talking about with the incidents with the Lion Air,
yeah,
737 MAX, that was a system that domestic airlines, United States, none of our airlines ever had any issues with that system and or fatalities associated with it.
John, thank you so much. It is crazy. That's exactly what my friend said. You thought, how could Boeing design an airplane, and have it that far out of whack that when you started to lift, it would fail on you? And my friend said yesterday that's because they're not trained. He said, in America, we train. That is something, he said, we've been training for 50 years on that. And he said, it's not hard to correct. You just have to know. So why is Boeing getting that rap? Remember, they went through the software and everything else. No. It was the pilots weren't trained. That's nuts. That's not who. I mean, is somebody trying to kill Boeing?
I mean, and every piece of the administration is echoing this. We played the Buttigieg clip earlier, but it's all focus on Boeing and how bad Boeing is.
Right. I haven't heard anything about the mechanics. I've heard people bring up United, and I think United is responsible for the mechanics.
Right. Sure.
But
sure.
You don't hear any of that.
That is weird, because especially because of how vitally important Boeing is to our economy. This is not just some little fly-by-night operation that you just. If they get taken down and they are losing ground against their competitors, which there are only a couple.
Let's go to line 11 and Jeff in Michigan. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, how you doing?
Very good. How are you?
All right. I think it's a multi-blame. Boeing on the design. MCAS is that was a Boeing design. I'm an aerospace engineer in addition to being a retired airline pilot. You go and look at that. The way they designed it, they shortcut stuff to save money. But once it gets to the airline and you have the things like falling off airplanes, then it becomes a maintenance issue. And that's where the blame lies. But the bottom line is it's all about money. MCAS was designed so that they could save money in getting away with introducing a new airplane as a derivative rather than having to get it completely certified with the new engines that were set on it. Because they'd have to raise the airplane up, so they have to put on new gear, maybe a new wing. So they shortcut that. And then in production, with the holes that they filled up with the door plugs, that sort of thing, that's a production issue. Again, saving money, they outsource it, and so it's not done as well as it should be. But once you get to the airlines, there's a very thin line between profit and loss with that.
Sure.
So they shortcut things to try and get stuff done as well.
Is the FAA or I don't know? Is the FAA under Secretary of Transportation? I would assume it is. Is the FAA responsible for certifying any of this stuff?
Oh yeah, FAA is done it. But I worked for ALPA Safety for a long time. The airline, well, I call it the Airline Pilots Association now for another reason, but. They have a schizophrenic mission. They have to promote flying at the same time that they're enforcing rules. And so they're kind of get pulled in two different directions when they're doing this. And if you don't have the proper administrator over it, making sure that they're doing both jobs, then you run into problems.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much. But doesn't that sound like we would maybe not have the right person in the federal position of like, hey, you got to get the planes up, but you also got to make sure that they're safe. For some reason, I don't have a lot of confidence in the leadership of this administration. No. I know it's just probably me.
It's fascinating. I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm mentioning I'm going on flights next week. I'm working on a documentary for Blaze Originals about air traffic control and the changes that have been going on within it. And they're not comforting. It doesn't. They're like, hey, can you take a flight to do this interview? No, I'll drive.
Wait, I've done all this research, and it shows that this is really not a good plan. And now you want me to fly there?
Right. No.